Hi, I'm Ira Kalish, Chief Economist of Deloitte, and this is your weekly economic update. During the past month, we saw continued elevated oil prices and very volatile oil prices given the uncertainty about the situation in the Middle East. And yet, despite that, we saw a very strong performance of U.S. equity prices. In fact, since the beginning of April, the well-known S&P 500 index of U.S. equities was up around 12%. And yet, half of that increase was attributable to just 5 large technology companies. In fact, if those 5 companies are excluded from the S&P 500 index, then the index only increased about 6%. What this tells us is that investors evidently believe that the investment taking place in AI on the part of large technology companies will be profitable despite what's going on in the short term in the Middle East. They're basically making a long-term bet that AI will be successful and profitable. And yet, the problem is that if the crisis in the Middle East continues and the price of oil remains elevated or goes even higher, which is possible, that would mean higher inflation, higher expectations of inflation, and likely a tighter monetary policy. And that, in turn, would likely lead to higher bond yields, higher borrowing costs for U.S. corporations. And it's worth noting that a lot of the investment taking place in AI is funded by debt. So if there was to be a significant increase in borrowing costs, that would have an impact, at least in the short term, on large technology companies that are making a big bet on AI. And so it's conceivable that in that scenario where there are higher borrowing costs, there could be a scale back in investment, there could be a drop in equity prices, and there could be a slowdown in the economy as a consequence. It's worth noting that over the past year, a very significant share of economic growth was attributable to all the investment that's taking place in AI and AI-related products. And so even though investors are betting that the investment in AI will not be affected by the situation in the Middle East, there is a plausible scenario in which that investment is affected by the situation in the Middle East. That's the update for this week, and I hope you have a good week.